No one could make the mafia boss's mute daughter speak until a poor caretaker did something unexpected. Jang Seung-chul controlled everything in Seoul's underworld. Cargo routes, politicians, entire neighborhoods. Grown men trembled just hearing his name. But the night his wife died in what looked like a car accident, something inside his 7-year-old daughter Nari died with her. She stopped eating properly, stopped laughing, stopped reaching for anyone, and then one morning she just stopped talking completely. 6 months of silence, not a single word. He flew in psychologists from Switzerland, trauma specialists from New York, nannies with credentials longer than their resumes. Every single one of them failed, every single one of them left. Because Nari didn't need credentials. She needed someone who would stay. Then one ordinary morning, his head of security walked into his office looking uncomfortable. "Sir, there's a woman at the gate. She says she knows. Your daughter. She's been sitting outside in the cold for 6 hours. 6 hours. No money, no connections, no reason to stay except one. She believed Nari could come back. And what this broke, fired nobody caretaker did next. Not only silenced every expert who came before her, it brought the most feared man in Seoul completely to his knees. But before I tell you everything, let me tell you how we got here. In Seoul's most secure compound, a 7-year-old girl hadn't spoken in 6 months, and the most feared man in the underworld couldn't do anything about it. Jang Seung-chul's name was whispered like a curse in the shipping districts. Politicians answered his calls at 3 a.m. Rival syndicates vanished overnight when they crossed him. He controlled cargo routes that moved billions, owned officials who rewrote laws, and commanded men who would die on his word. But he couldn't get his daughter to say a single word. Nari sat in the corner of her bedroom, a room that cost more than most people's houses. Princess canopy bed from Italy, toys imported from Switzerland, walls painted the exact shade of pink she'd loved before her mother died, before she stopped speaking, before her eyes went empty. The compound had 24 armed guards, 12-foot walls topped with cameras, bulletproof windows, 3 layers of security just to reach the residential floor. Seung-chul had built a fortress around his daughter because that's what powerful men do. They eliminate threats, they build walls, they control everything within reach. Except you can't control grief. You can't threaten silence into speaking. And you definitely can't buy back a mother who's already gone. The experts came with their leather briefcases and soft voices. Child psychologists from Switzerland who charged $10,000 for a 2-hour session. Trauma specialists from New York who wrote books about selective mutism. Nannies with credentials longer than their resumes, trained in childhood development and behavioral therapy. Nari stared through every single one of them like they were made of glass. She needs time, they said, packing their things after the 3rd failed session. She needs consistency, they promised before quitting after 2 weeks. She needs you, one brave therapist suggested, and Seung-chul showed her the door so fast she left her notes behind. Because what was he supposed to do with that? He didn't know how to be what she needed. He knew how to break a man's fingers until he talked, how to negotiate shipping contracts worth 8 figures, how to make grown men weep with a single phone call. But when Nari woke up screaming in the middle of the night, reaching for her mother, calling for someone who would never come, Seung-chul stood frozen in her doorway like a stranger. His hands trembled. The same hands that had signed death warrants without hesitation. The same hands that had built an empire from blood and silence. Useless. So he did what he knew best. He built higher walls, hired more guards, upgraded the security system, added an extra floor to the compound where Nari could be safe, isolated, protected from a world that had already stolen too much. He convinced himself this was love, this was protection, this was what a father does. But late at night, when the compound was quiet and Nari's nightmares echoed through, the hall's Seung-chul stood outside her locked door and wondered if he was building a fortress or a prison. He wondered if the walls were keeping danger out, or if they were keeping her in. 6 months of silence. 6 months of watching his daughter fade like a photograph left in the sun. 6 months of throwing money at a problem that didn't care how much he had. And the worst part, the part that kept him awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of his empty bedroom, he was running out of options. He was running out of hope. And deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge even to himself, Jang Seung-chul the man who controlled half of Seoul's underground, was terrified that he'd already lost her, that the walls he built to keep her safe had trapped her so completely that she'd never find her way back out. The clinic was his last option. Not because he'd run out of money, Seung-chul could buy 10 clinics without checking his account balance, but because he'd run out of ideas, out of experts, out of promises that never delivered. The brochure arrived in an unmarked envelope delivered by someone who knew what Seung-chul needed. Very discreet and private. For families who had difficulties they didn't want publicized. Elite rehabilitation center for special cases. The photos looked like a luxury resort, mountain views, private rooms, gardens with stone pathways, the kind of place where wealthy people sent their problems to disappear. We specialize in trauma-induced behavioral disorders, the director explained during the tour, leading Seung-chul through hallways that smelled like lavender and antiseptic. Your daughter will receive individualized attention from our most experienced staff. What he didn't mention, Ward C was in the basement. What he didn't say, individualized attention, meant isolation rooms with locks on the outside. What he definitely didn't explain, their definition of structure would break something. Already fragile. But Seung-chul didn't ask those questions. He was desperate, and desperate men make dangerous decisions. Can you get her to speak again? The director smiled. Professional, confident, expensive. Mr. Yang, we have a 92% success rate with selective mutism cases. I'll pay you double, triple if it works. Money isn't the issue. Time and trust are. Give us 6 weeks. Seung-chul looked at Nari through the observation window. She sat on a medical examination table, feet dangling, staring at nothing. A nurse tried to hand her a stuffed animal. Nari didn't even blink. 6 weeks felt like forever. 6 weeks felt like his last chance. When can she start? Ward C had white walls, white floors, white ceiling tiles with fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Nari's room had a bed, a chair, and a window too small to see anything but sky. No toys, no colors, no princess canopy. Environmental simplification reduces overstimulation, Dr. Kang explained. Some children respond better to structure. Nari didn't respond at all. They tried art therapy. She stared at blank paper. Music therapy. She sat silent while a woman played piano. Play therapy. She wouldn't touch the toys. Seung-chul visited twice a week, sitting in the chair across from her bed, talking about things he thought might sound fatherly. The weather, the garden back home, her favorite foods back when she used to eat. She never looked at him, not once in 3 weeks. On the 22nd day, Seung-chul was in a meeting when his phone rang. Private number. He almost didn't answer. He was negotiating a shipping contract worth $30 million, but something cold crawled down his spine. He answered. Mr. Jang, this is Dr. Kang. There's been an incident. 4 words. The world tilted. What kind of incident? A pause. Too long. The kind of pause that means everything just went wrong. You need to come to the clinic now. The line went dead. Seung-chul was out the door. Before his phone hit the table, his driver breaking every traffic law on the mountain road, his mind racing through 1,000 terrible possibilities. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for what he found when he arrived. Ward C looked like a crime scene. Security guards everywhere, police taking statements, medical equipment scattered across the hallway, and in the center of it all, a stretcher being wheeled toward an ambulance. On that stretcher, small and broken and terrifyingly still, was Nari. Seung-chul didn't remember running, didn't remember shoving past the guards or grabbing Dr. Kang by the collar hard enough to lift him off his feet. What happened to my daughter? Dr. Kang's face was gray, sweating. His glasses sat crooked on his nose. There was an attempt she tried to exit through. What happened? She fell, 2nd floor window. We found her in the garden. The rest disappeared into white noise. Fell, 2nd floor, garden, Seung-chul. Released Dr. Kang and moved to the stretcher like he was underwater. Everything slow, everything muffled. A paramedic tried to stop him, but one look at his face made her step back. Nari's arm was bent wrong. Her face was too pale. A bruise bloomed purple across her temple. Her eyes were closed. Is she... He couldn't finish the sentence. She's alive, the paramedic said quickly. Broken arm. Possible concussion. She's breathing, but we need to get her to the hospital now. Alive. The word barely registered. I'm coming with her. Sir, family can follow in. I'm coming with her. Nobody argued. The hospital was a blur. X-rays, CT scans, doctors speaking in medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language. Seung-chul sat in a plastic chair outside the pediatric ward, his $3,000 suit wrinkled, his hands shaking, his mind replaying one question over and over. Why would she try to escape? Dr. Kang showed up an hour later, flanked by the clinic's lawyer. Seung-chul stood so fast his chair tipped backward. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. Right now. Dr. Kang looked at his lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. Nari refused to eat lunch. Standard protocol for non-compliance is temporary isolation. For reflection. She was placed in a quiet room. For how long? Silence. How long? 8 hours. Something snapped inside Seung-chul's chest. Cold, final, irreversible. You locked my 7-year-old daughter in a room. For 8 hours. Because she wouldn't eat. It's standard therapeutic. She's 7 years old. She watched her mother die. She hasn't spoken in half a year, and you locked her in a cage. Dr. Kang stepped back. Mr. Jang, please understand. Get out. We can discuss. Get out of this hospital before I forget there are witnesses. They left. Seung-chul stood alone in the fluorescent hallway, staring at the closed door to Nari's room, and finally understood what he'd done. He'd built a fortress to protect her, and she'd been so desperate to escape it that she tried to fly. Nari came home 4 days later. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't react when the nurse wheeled her into the compound, past the guards, up the elevator to her room with its princess canopy and expensive toys. She just existed. Her broken arm was in a pink cast covered with cartoon characters the hospital staff had drawn, trying to make her smile. She'd stared through them too. Now she sat in her bed, propped up by imported pillows, and stared at the wall. Seung-chul fired everyone, the psychologists, the nannies, the specialists, with their useless theories. He filed lawsuits against Dr. Kang's clinic, lawsuits designed to bury them so deep they'd never hurt another child. His lawyers promised total destruction, but revenge felt hollow because Nari was still silent, still fading, and this time it was worse. She wouldn't even eat unless someone physically placed the spoon in her mouth. Wouldn't change clothes unless someone dressed her like a doll. Wouldn't acknowledge that anyone else existed in the room. She'd disappeared inside herself so completely that Seung-chul wondered if she was ever coming back. 3 days after she came home, his head of security knocked on his office door. Sir, there's someone at the gate asking to see you about Nari. Seung-chul didn't look up from the contracts he wasn't reading. Tell them I'm not interested. I did, sir. She says she was at the clinic, one of the staff. She was there the night Nari fell. His pen stopped moving. Send her away. Sir, she's been sitting outside the gate for 6 hours. Arielle was not what he expected. Mid-20s maybe, tired eyes that had seen too much, clothes that had been washed so many times the fabric was thin, shoes with worn soles. She stood in his office, this massive room with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture worth more than most people's cars, and she didn't look impressed. She looked angry. I worked night shifts in Ward C, she said before Seung-chul could speak. I was there the night Nari fell. His jaw tightened. If you're here to apologize on behalf of... I'm not apologizing for anything. I'm here because I'm the only person your daughter has responded to in 2 months, and you're too proud or too scared to ask for help. The room went silent. Seung-chul stood slowly. He was a tall man, intimidating. People usually stepped back when he stood. Arielle didn't move. Get out of my office. The night she fell, Arielle continued, ignoring him completely, I was the one who found her, in the garden. She was lying on the ground, crying, not screaming, just crying, quiet and broken like she'd given up on anyone hearing her. Something twisted in Seung-chul's chest. I sat with her until the ambulance came. I held her hand, and you know what? She held mine back. First time she'd reached for anyone in weeks. His hands clenched into fists. Why are you telling me this? Because the next night, I was fired. Security risk, they said. But before I left, I went to her room one last time. She was awake, and when I said goodbye, Arielle's voice caught. She reached for me, didn't make a sound, but she reached. Seung-chul felt something crack inside him. What do you want? Arielle met his eyes. I don't want anything, but Nari needs someone who actually sees her. Not her trauma, not her silence, her, and right now, I'm the only one offering. Arielle moved into a room on the same floor as Nari the next day. Seung-chul made it clear she wasn't a nanny, wasn't staff, wasn't anything he had a name for. She was just there. 1 week trial, 7 days to prove whatever she thought she could prove. After that, you leave, he told her. Arielle didn't argue, just nodded and carried her single duffel bag to the guest room. The first morning, she sat on the floor of Nari's bedroom. Not on the chair, not on the bed, on the carpet, back against the wall, a book in her lap. Nari was across the room in her usual spot, curled in the corner by the window, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Arielle opened the book and started reading aloud. Not a children's book. Those had failed. She read poetry, short stories, sometimes just articles from the newspaper. Her voice was steady, calm. She didn't try to make it entertaining, didn't use different voices or sound effects. Just read. Nari didn't look at her, didn't move, didn't react at all. But she didn't flinch when Arielle entered the room, and that Arielle knew was something. Day 3, Seung-chul stood in the hallway watching through the cracked door. Arielle was reading a poem about rain. Nari was still in her corner. Nothing had changed. This isn't working, he said, pushing the door open. Arielle didn't look up from her book. She stopped holding her breath when I come in. That's working. She's not talking. She's not eating. Properly. She's not. She moved 2 inches closer to me this morning. Seung-chul blinked. 2 inches. Yes. That's not progress. That's nothing. Arielle finally looked at him. To you, maybe. To her, it's everything. She went back to reading. Seung-chul stood there, frustrated and helpless, watching this woman who owned nothing talk to his daughter, who responded to nothing, and wondered what kind of miracle she expected to happen in 4 more days. Day 6. Nari sat 3 feet from Arielle during reading time, not next to her, not touching, but closer. Close enough that when Arielle turned the page, Nari could see the words. Seung-chul watched from the doorway, his heart doing something painful and unfamiliar in his chest. You don't have to hide, Arielle said without looking up from her book. He froze. She knows you're there. She always knows. Arielle's voice softened as she kept reading, and for the first time in months, Nari's eyes weren't completely empty. They held something small, something that looked almost like curiosity. Sometimes the people who heal us aren't the ones with all the answers. They're just the ones willing to sit on the floor and wait. If you've ever been that person for someone or needed that person yourself, you understand what's happening in this room. Arielle looked at Seung-chul then. Sit. I don't. Sit. Jang Seung-chul, who had toppled rival organizations and made politicians beg, sat on the carpet of his daughter's bedroom like a scolded child. Arielle kept reading. Nari stayed still, but her eyes flicked toward him just for a second. The first time she'd acknowledged his presence in months. It felt like everything. The 3 of them sat there in silence. Broken man, patient stranger, silent child, existing in the same space without walls for the first time since the world fell apart. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the beginning of something. Week 2 started with rain. Arielle sat in her usual spot, reading a story about a lighthouse keeper. Nari sat closer now, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. Almost. Seung-chul had started joining them. Every morning, sitting awkwardly on the floor in his expensive suit, trying not to make noise, trying not to hope too hard. Nari would glance at him sometimes, quick looks when she thought he wasn't paying attention. He always was. On the 9th day, something shifted. Arielle was reading about the ocean when Nari slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, leaned against her shoulder. Arielle didn't react, didn't acknowledge it, just kept reading, her voice steady, while this tiny broken girl finally let herself be close to someone. Seung-chul's throat closed up. He watched his daughter, this child who'd locked herself away so completely he thought he'd lost her, choose to trust someone, choose to be vulnerable. Choose to exist in the same space as another human being, and he realized something. That hit him like a punch to the chest. She'd never done that with him. Not once since her mother died had Nari leaned against him. Let him hold her, chosen his presence over isolation, because he'd never given her the chance. He'd stood in doorways, frozen and afraid. He'd hired strangers to fix her. He'd built walls and called it protection, but he'd never just sat with her, never waited, never let her choose him. That afternoon, after Arielle left to get lunch, Seung-chul stayed in Nari's room. She was back in her corner by the window, drawing with the crayons Arielle had brought. Not drawing anything specific, just lines and circles, keeping her hands busy. Seung-chul sat on the floor where Arielle usually sat. Nari's hand paused. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He didn't know what to say, didn't have a book to read or a story to tell, so he just sat there, hands in his lap, trying to look like someone safe. Nari watched him for a long moment. Then she went back to drawing, but she didn't leave, didn't curl up tighter, didn't disappear into herself. She just existed in the same room as her father, and that felt like forgiveness he hadn't earned yet. Felt like a door that had been locked for 6 months, opening just a crack. Felt like maybe, possibly, if he was patient enough and quiet enough and present enough, his daughter might let him back in. 3 weeks into Arielle's 1-week trial, Nari ate a full meal without needing help. 4 weeks in, she fell asleep during reading time, her head on Arielle's shoulder, her breathing deep and even. The first peaceful sleep Seung-chul had witnessed in months. 5 weeks in, Nari picked up a book herself and handed it to Arielle. A choice, a request, a tiny step toward wanting something again. 6 weeks in, she sat between Arielle and Seung-chul during reading time, letting both of them exist in her carefully constructed world. Seung-chul read aloud, stumbling. Over words, his deep voice awkward with poetry, while Nari listened. She didn't speak, but she stayed. And for the first time since his wife died, since his daughter went silent, since he built a fortress that became a prison, Jang Seung-chul thought maybe he hadn't lost her completely. Maybe she was still in there. Maybe she just needed someone to wait while she found her way back. Then his past came for them. The first bomb went off in one of Seung-chul's shipping warehouses at 2 a.m. The second hit a restaurant he owned in Gangnam 3 hours later. The third never detonated. His men found it first, wired under a truck at one of his distribution centers. Someone was making a move, and they wanted him to know it. Seung-chul stood in his operations room, surrounded by monitors showing security feeds, maps of his territory, and photographs of the damage. His top lieutenants were on speakerphone, reporting casualties and losses. "It's the Gwangju crew," his security chief said. "Has to be. They've been quiet since we pushed them out last year, but they're testing us," Seung-chul finished, "seeing if we'll respond. What do you want us to do?" What he wanted was to be upstairs, sitting on the floor of his daughter's room, listening to Arielle read. What he wanted was to pretend he wasn't the kind of man who had enemies willing to kill innocent people to send a message. But that wasn't his reality. Increase security at all primary locations. Find out who's backing them. Nobody moves like this without money. And send a message to their leadership. I want a meeting. What kind of message? Seung-chul's voice went cold. The kind they'll understand. He worked through the night, coordinating responses, making calls, handling the kind of business he'd been trying to distance himself from. The kind of business that reminded him exactly who he was and what he'd built his empire on. By dawn, he had a location for the Gwangju crew's main operations. By noon, his men were in position. By evening, the problem would be handled, permanently. He was so focused on the tactical details, the maps, the phone calls, the strategy, that he didn't notice the time. Didn't notice he'd missed breakfast with Nari. Didn't notice he'd skipped their afternoon reading session. Didn't notice that for the first time in 6 weeks, he'd chosen his old life over his new one. Upstairs, Nari sat by the window, watching the door, waiting for her father to come read with her like he'd done every day. He never showed. Arielle tried to distract her, but Nari's eyes kept drifting to the empty spot on the floor where Seung-chul usually sat. "He's working," Arielle said gently. "He'll be here tomorrow." Nari didn't respond, just went back to staring at nothing, her small shoulders curling inward, going back to the place she'd been before. At midnight, Seung-chul was finalizing the raid when his head of compound security appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we have a situation." "Not now. We move in 20 minutes." "Sir, it's the residential floor." Something in his tone made Seung-chul look up. "What kind of situation?" "Perimeter breach. 2 hostiles. They made it past the outer security, Looks like we had people on the inside. They're headed toward... The rest disappeared into static as Seung-chul's blood turned to ice. Where? Nari's hallway. He was running before the man finished speaking. Arielle heard them before she saw them. Heavy footsteps in the hallway, wrong rhythm, wrong weight. Not the guards who patrolled this floor. She was reading to Nari, who'd finally fallen asleep against her shoulder after hours of waiting for her father. The book fell from Arielle's hands. Nari, she whispered urgently. Wake up, baby. Wake up right now. Nari's eyes opened, confused and sleepy. I need you to hide. Right now. Can you do that for me? The little girl's eyes went wide. She nodded. Arielle moved fast, locked the bedroom door from the inside, shoved the heavy dresser against it with strength she didn't know she had, opened the closet. Get in. All the way to the back. Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear, don't make a sound. Do you understand? Nari's face had gone pale, terrified. But she climbed into the closet without arguing, curling into the far corner behind the hanging dresses. Good girl, Arielle whispered. I'm right here. You're safe. She closed the closet door just as someone kicked the bedroom door. Once, twice. The dresser scraped across the floor. Third kick and the door exploded inward. 2 men. Late 30s, maybe. Cold eyes. The kind of men who hurt people for a living. They looked at Arielle standing in the middle of the room alone, and one of them smiled. Where's the girl? Arielle's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe, but her voice came out steady. Gone. Moved to a safe house yesterday. You're too late. The first man stepped closer. You're lying. Search the room if you don't believe me. He did. Checked under the bed, behind the curtains. His partner moved toward the closet, and Arielle's stomach dropped. There's nothing in there but clothes, she said quickly. The kid's not here. Seung-chul moved her when the attack started. The man's hand was on the closet door handle. Inside, Nari pressed her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, trying not to breathe too loud. Check it anyway, the first man ordered. Arielle moved without thinking, stepped between the man and the closet door. I said she's not here. Move. No. The first punch caught her in the stomach. She doubled over, gasping. The second hit her face, snapping her head back. She tasted blood, but she didn't move away from the closet. Last chance. Where is she? Arielle spit blood on the floor. Go to hell. What happened next was fast. Professional. Brutal. Arielle fought, harder than they expected, clawing and kicking and screaming, but she was one person against 2 trained killers. When she finally stopped moving, blood pooling on the expensive carpet, one of the men grabbed the closet door handle. Then gunfire erupted in the hallway. Seung-chul's men had arrived. The 2 intruders turned toward the door, reaching for their weapons. But they were too slow, too distracted. They were dead before they hit the floor. Seung-chul burst into the room and saw Arielle first, unconscious, face destroyed, blood everywhere. Then he saw the closet door, still closed. Nari! He choked out, stumbling toward it. He yanked the door open and found his daughter in the back corner, hands pressed over her mouth, eyes wide and empty, tears streaming silently down her face. She'd watched everything through the crack in the door, watched Arielle fight, watched her fall, watched the only person she trusted get destroyed trying to protect her. Nari, sweetheart, it's okay. You're safe now. They're gone. But when he reached for her, she flinched away so violently she hit her head against the wall. Looked at him like he was the danger, like this was his fault. And the worst part, the part that broke something fundamental inside Jang Seung-chul, was that she was right. This was his fault. He'd gotten distracted, pulled back into his old life, let his guard down, and the people he'd hurt in the past had come for revenge by hurting the only thing he loved. Nari curled tighter into the corner of the closet, shaking, silent, more broken than she'd ever been. 6 weeks of progress, destroyed in 6 minutes. Arielle didn't wake up for 3 days. Broken ribs, shattered cheekbone, severe concussion, internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. Seung-chul sat beside her hospital bed and didn't feel lucky at all. Nari was back at the compound with round-the-clock security, but she wouldn't come out of her closet. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Just sat in the dark with her hands over her mouth like she was still hiding, like the danger was still there. The compound psychologist tried to help, Seung-chul had hired her back, desperate, but Nari wouldn't let anyone near her. She'd regressed further than before. Worse than after the clinic, worse than after her mother's death. She'd disappeared completely, and it was his fault. On the third day, Arielle's eyes finally opened. Seung-chul was staring at his hands, replaying the moment he'd found her bleeding on Nari's bedroom floor when he heard her voice. Did they hurt her? He looked up sharply. Arielle's face was swollen beyond recognition. Her words slurred from the broken cheekbone, but her eyes were clear. No, he managed. You stopped them. Good. She closed her eyes again, wincing in pain. Why did you do it? The question came out broken. You could have hidden with her, run, called for help. Why did you stand between them in that closet? Arielle's damaged mouth tried to smile. It looked painful. Because she needed to know someone would. You almost died. Better me than her, thinking nobody cared enough to try. Seung-chul's throat tightened. She saw. Through the crack in the door, she saw what they did to you. Arielle's eyes opened again, filled with something that looked like grief. How bad? She won't come out of the closet, won't eat, won't let anyone touch her. He couldn't finish. Worse than before? Yes. Arielle was quiet for a long moment, then with effort that clearly hurt, Then you have work to do. What? I can't fix this, Seung-chul. I tried. I gave her 6 weeks of patience, and it got erased in 6 minutes. She needs more than I can give. I don't understand what She needs you, not your money, not your guards, not your revenge. You, the version of you that sits on floors and reads poetry badly and shows up every single day. He shook his head. She won't even look at me. Then you sit outside her closet and you wait. You read to her through the door. You be there when she's ready, even if it takes months, even if it takes years. And if she's never ready? Arielle's eyes were hard despite her injuries. Then you wait anyway. Because that's what love actually is. Seung-chul stared at this woman who'd sacrificed everything for a child that wasn't hers, and something fundamental shifted inside him. Real change doesn't happen in the big dramatic moments. It happens in the quiet choice to stay when everything's broken, to show up when there's no guarantee it'll matter. If you've ever had to make that choice, to keep showing up for someone who couldn't show up for you yet, you know how hard it is and how necessary. Arielle fell asleep again, exhausted from talking. Seung-chul sat in the hospital chair and made a decision. Not the kind of decision he usually made, calculated, strategic, designed to eliminate threats. A different kind. The kind that required him to dismantle everything he'd built and become someone completely different. The kind that scared him more than any rival syndicate ever had. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. It took 6 months to dismantle what had taken 15 years to build. Seung-chul started with the violent operations, the protection rackets, the underground gambling, the shipments that came with no paperwork and questions nobody asked. He transferred control to trusted lieutenants with one instruction: keep it running, but keep my name off it. Some of them argued, most of them understood, a few tried to take advantage of what they saw as weakness. Those problems were handled quietly, permanently. Old habits died hard. But Seung-chul was done being that version of himself, the version that solved problems with violence, that built empires on fear, that thought power meant control. He liquidated assets, sold properties, cut ties with politicians who'd been on his payroll for years, made enemies of people who used to be allies. His financial advisors said he was destroying his legacy. His security team said he was making himself vulnerable. His remaining lieutenant said he'd regret this when the next ambitious crew made their move. He didn't care, because every night he went home to his compound and sat outside Nari's closet door. She wouldn't come out, wouldn't speak, wouldn't acknowledge he was there, but he showed up anyway. Hey, sweetheart, he'd say quietly. I'm here, just going to sit with you for a bit, okay? Then he'd sit with his back against the wall and read. Poetry, short stories, whatever Arielle had been reading before everything fell apart. His voice was terrible for poetry, too rough, too deep. He stumbled over words and didn't understand half the metaphors. But he read anyway. Sometimes he'd hear Nari shift in the closet. A quiet breath, the rustle of fabric, small signs that she knew he was there, that she was listening, that maybe, eventually, she might believe he wasn't going anywhere. Arielle came back after 2 months, still recovering, walking with a slight limp. She moved into her old room without being asked. Nari let her into the closet on the first try. It hurt, watching his daughter choose Arielle over him. But Seung-chul understood. Arielle had proven herself, had bled for Nari, had earned that trust. He was still earning it. The real estate agent thought he was joking. "You want to leave this?" She gestured at the compound, the marble floors, the imported fixtures, the security system worth more than most houses. "For a 3-bedroom cottage on the coast?" "Yes. Mr. Jang, with all due respect, this is quite a downgrade." "That's the point. The house was small, needed repairs. The paint was peeling and the garden was overgrown, and the view of the ocean was half blocked by wild grass that had grown too tall. It was perfect. No gates, no guards, no 12-foot walls topped with cameras. Just a house. A normal house where normal people lived normal lives. They moved in on a Tuesday. Arielle had her own room. Nari got the bedroom with the window facing the water. Seung-chul took the smallest room with the creaky floorboards. Nari still wouldn't talk, still spent most of her time hiding, now in her closet in the new house, same as the old one. But something was different. The first morning, Seung-chul tried to make breakfast, burned the eggs, set off the smoke detector. Arielle laughed so hard she had to sit down. Nari cracked her closet door open just an inch, just enough to peek out and see what the noise was about. It was the first time she'd shown curiosity about anything in months. "Sorry," Seung-chul said, waving a towel at the smoke detector. "Apparently I can run a criminal empire, but I can't cook eggs." Arielle took over breakfast duty after that, but Nari kept her closet door open a crack during meals, listening to them talk, listening to her. Father fail at normal things. Listening to Arielle tease him about burning toast and forgetting to add salt, listening to what a home sounded like when it wasn't full of guards and fear. Weeks passed. Slowly, carefully, Nari started emerging, not to talk, not to engage, but to exist in the same space. She'd sit in the doorway of her room while Seung-chul and Arielle cooked dinner. Wouldn't help, wouldn't come closer, but she'd watch. She'd follow them to the garden when they tried to plant vegetables. Neither of them knew what they were doing, and sit on the porch steps, observing their mistakes. She'd come to the living room when Seung-chul read the newspaper aloud in the evenings, curling up in the corner chair, silent but present. Baby steps. Painful, slow baby steps, but steps nonetheless. One afternoon, Seung-chul was struggling with a leaky faucet under the kitchen sink. He'd never fixed anything in his life, always had people for that, when he felt something small press into his hand. A wrench. He looked up. Nari stood there, holding out the tool he needed, her face carefully blank. "Thank you," he said softly. She didn't respond, just set the wrench down and walked away. But she'd helped him, chosen to help him, and that felt like everything. 8 months after the attack, Nari woke up screaming. Seung-chul was downstairs cleaning up from dinner, another disaster. He'd somehow made pasta that was simultaneously mushy and crunchy when he heard it. That sound, the one that used to freeze him in doorways. This time, he ran. He took the stairs 2 at a time, burst into Nari's room, and found her sitting up in bed, sobbing. Not silent tears, real, gasping, terrified sobs. She was having a nightmare. About the closet, the blood, the men with cold eyes. Seung-chul didn't hesitate, didn't freeze, didn't stand helpless in the doorway wondering what to do. He sat on the edge of her bed and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, her whole body, going rigid, and for a second he thought she'd pull away, push him off, run back to her closet where she felt safe, but then she collapsed against him, her small body shaking, her tears soaking through his shirt, and Jang Seung-chul held his daughter for the first time in over a year. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry, Nari." She cried harder. "I tried to protect you by building walls, by hiring people, by controlling everything around you, but all I did was trap you, lock you away, make you feel alone, even when you were surrounded by people." Her fingers clutched his shirt. "I was so afraid of losing you that I lost you anyway. I chose my old life over you. I let you down when you needed me most. And people got hurt because I wasn't paying attention." The sobs were quieter now, but her grip on his shirt hadn't loosened. "I can't fix what I did. I can't take back the clinic or the attack or all the times I stood in your doorway instead of coming in. But I'm here now. Right here. And I'm not leaving. Not for work, not for anything. I promise. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, tear-streaked, eyes red but present, actually looking at him instead of through him. I know you might not believe me yet. I know I have to prove it, but I need you to know. His voice broke. I need you to know that you are the most important thing in my world. More than money, more than power, more than anything I ever built. You, just you. Nari stared at him, her bottom lip trembling, and then so quiet he almost missed it. Appa. Daddy. The world stopped. Every sound, every breath, everything. That one word, the first word she'd spoken in over a year, hit him like a physical blow. Nari, he breathed. She buried her face in his shoulder and whispered it again. Appa. Seung-chul's eyes filled with tears. His hands shook as he held her closer, trying not to squeeze too tight, trying not to break this fragile moment. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I've got you. And for the first time since her mother died, Nari let herself believe it. Let herself trust that he wasn't going anywhere. Let herself be a child who needed her father instead of a broken thing that nobody could fix. They stayed like that for a long time, crying together, holding each other, existing in this moment that felt both devastating and healing. Arielle appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, watching this father and daughter finally find each other again. She didn't interrupt, just smiled and quietly closed the door. That night, Nari spoke one word, just one, but it changed everything. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's not a dramatic moment where everything suddenly gets better. It's a whispered word in the dark, a choice to trust again when trust has been broken, a decision to let someone hold you even though you're terrified they'll let go. If this story is touching something in you, if it's reminding you of your own journey or someone you love, then it was meant for you. The next morning, Nari came down to breakfast, didn't hide in her room, didn't watch from the doorway. She walked into the kitchen, climbed into a chair at the table, and sat with them. She still didn't talk much, just that one word she'd given her father in the dark. But she was there, present, choosing to be part of this small, broken, healing family. Seung-chul made eggs, burned them again. Arielle laughed. Nari's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. And in that moment, sitting in their small kitchen in their small house by the sea, watching his daughter almost smile at his terrible cooking, Jang Seung-chul understood something profound. This was the empire that mattered. This quiet morning, this burned breakfast, this child who was learning to trust again. This was worth more than everything he'd built before. Worth more than power or money or fear. Worth everything. 2 years passed. Not quickly, not easily, but they passed. Nari started talking in short sentences, still quiet, still careful, but there. She went to a small school nearby, made one friend, a girl named Minju, who talked enough for both of them. She went to therapy every week with a woman who specialized in childhood trauma. Never pushed, just sat with her, listened when Nari was ready to speak. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, she healed. Seung-chul learned to cook, sort of. He could make scrambled eggs without setting off the smoke detector now. That counted as progress. He helped Nari with her homework, getting half the math problems wrong, making her giggle when he couldn't remember basic multiplication. He attended parent-teacher conferences, sitting in chairs too small for him, listening to her teacher say she was doing wonderfully, considering. He was just dad. Not a mafia boss. Not a feared criminal. Just a father who was learning how to be present. Arielle stayed, officially as Nari's tutor, unofficially as family. The third bedroom was hers and nobody questioned it. On weekends, they worked in the garden. Arielle had somehow coaxed vegetables out of the stubborn soil, tomatoes and peppers and herbs that actually grew. Nari loved it, loved digging in the dirt, planting seeds, watching things grow. One Saturday afternoon, she was helping Seung-chul build a raised bed for strawberries. She handed him nails, held board steady while he hammered, badly, then out of nowhere. Appa, were you afraid back then? He paused, hammer in mid-swing. When, sweetheart? When I wouldn't talk. When everything was bad. He set the hammer down carefully, sat back on his heels. Every single day. Are you still afraid? He thought about it, really thought. Yes, but now I'm afraid of the right things. Like what? Like not being here when you need me. Like missing your school play because I'm working. Like forgetting to pick you up from Minju's house. Nari tilted her head. Those are small things. Small things are the biggest things, Nari. I used to think power and money mattered. But the really important stuff, it's this. You and me building a strawberry bed on a Saturday. That's what matters. She went back to holding the board steady, but she was smiling. Really smiling. And Seung-chul had never won anything in his life that felt as good as making his daughter smile. 3 years after the move to the coast, Nari's therapist asked her a question. When did you start feeling safe again? They were in the small office that smelled like lavender, sitting in comfortable chairs with the window open to let the breeze in. Nari thought about it. She was 10 now, thoughtful, still quiet, but present in a way she hadn't been before. When he stopped trying to protect me, Dr. Yoon raised an eyebrow. Can you explain what you mean? Before, Appa thought protecting me meant keeping me away from everything scary. Big walls, guards, locks on doors. But that made me feel trapped. Like I was the scary thing that needed to be locked up. And now? Now he just sits with me. When I'm scared, he doesn't try to fix it or make it go away. He just sits there and waits until I'm ready to talk about it or not talk about it. He doesn't need me to be okay. He's okay with me being not okay. Dr. Yoon smiled. That's very insightful, Nari. Arielle taught him that. She's good at sitting with people. She sounds important to you. She's family. Not like official family, but the real kind. What's the difference? Nari thought carefully. Official family is the people you're related to. Real family is the people who show up, who stay when things are hard, who sit on the floor and read to you even when you won't talk back. And your dad is real family now? Yeah, he wasn't before. He was just there, but scared. Too scared to actually be with me. Now he's not scared anymore. What changed? Nari looked out the window at the ocean. I think he realized that losing me didn't mean I might die. It meant he might never really know me. So he decided to know me, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts. After the session, Seung-chul was waiting outside in the car. Nari climbed in, buckled her seatbelt. How was it? He asked. Good, we talked about you. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Should I be worried? No, I told her you used to be scared, but now you're brave. His throat tightened. I don't feel very brave. That's what makes it brave, Appa, being scared and doing it anyway. On the drive home, Nari asked if they could stop for ice cream. They did, sat on the beach, eating melting ice cream cones, watching the waves, not talking about anything important, just existing together, just being father and daughter on a normal afternoon doing a normal thing, and that was everything. That night, Seung-chul stood in the doorway of Nari's room, not frozen this time, just watching as she organized her books before bed. Do you miss it? She asked without looking up. The old life? He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. Not the violence or the fear, but the feeling of being powerful, being in control, knowing exactly what to do in every situation. And now? Now I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I'm terrible at cooking and worse at homework help, and I still can't figure out how to braid your hair properly. She smiled. But you try. But I try. I think that's better. The old you knew everything. This you is learning. Learning is better than knowing. He didn't have a response to that, just walked over and kissed the top of her head. Good night, sweetheart. Good night, Appa. And for the first time in years, Jang Seung-chul went to sleep without ghosts. Nari is 10 years old now. She speaks, not constantly, not like some kids who never stop talking, but enough. She laughs sometimes, especially when Arielle burns dinner or when her father tries to help with math. Homework and gets the fractions wrong. She has friends at school, not many, but real ones. Kids who understand that sometimes she needs quiet, who don't push her to talk when she's not ready. She's in therapy, real therapy, with someone patient and kind who never makes her feel broken. She's healing, slowly, imperfectly, but healing. Seung-chul runs a legitimate shipping business now. Boring, he jokes, though nobody believes him. He's home every night by 6, cooks dinner with Arielle, helps Nari with homework, attends school events, and sits through piano recitals and shows up to parent-teacher conferences. He's just a dad. The most important thing he's ever been. Arielle lives in the 3rd bedroom. Officially, she's Nari's tutor. Unofficially, she's the glue that holds this small family together. Nobody questions it anymore. Tonight is Nari's school's parent night. They sit in her classroom while her teacher shows them the essay Nari wrote about her family. Seung-chul reads it, silently, his eyes getting suspiciously wet. My Family by Nari Jang. My dad used to think love meant keeping me safe from everything. He built big walls and had lots of guards and tried to control everything around me, but that just made me feel alone. Then he learned something important. He learned that love isn't about protecting someone from being hurt. It's about being there when they get hurt. It's about sitting with them when they're scared instead of trying to fix their fear. He also learned that he's really bad at cooking eggs and at math and at braiding hair, but he shows up every day and tries anyway. I think that's braver than being powerful. Being powerful means you know everything. Trying means you don't know, but you care enough to fail. My dad used to be powerful. Now he's just trying. I like him better this way. We also have Arielle. She's not my mom, but she's my family. She's the one who taught my dad how to sit still and wait. She's the one who stayed, even when it was hard. My family is small and kind of weird, and nobody's perfect. But we show up for each other. That's what love is. Showing up. Seung-chul finishes reading and has to look away, blinking hard. The teacher smiles. She's an amazing writer, and clearly she's doing very well. She's amazing, Seung-chul manages. That's all her. We're just trying to keep up. Later that night, after Nari is asleep, Seung-chul stands in her doorway. Not frozen this time, just watching. She's curled up under her blanket, breathing deep and peaceful, one arm around the stuffed rabbit Arielle gave her. He thinks about the fortress he built, the walls that nearly killed her, the control that cost him everything. He thinks about how he failed her, not once, but twice. How his choices, his fear disguised as protection, broke something precious. He thinks about how redemption isn't a single moment, not a dramatic sacrifice or a grand gesture. It's showing up every day, even when you're terrified, even when you don't know what to do. It's sitting on the floor and waiting. It's letting someone else hold the pieces you can't carry. It's learning that love isn't a cage. Nari stirs in her sleep, and Seung-chul steps quietly into the room. He pulls her blanket up around her shoulders, tucking her in the way she likes. She doesn't wake, but her breathing settles. Peaceful, safe. Sleep well, little one, he whispers. And for the first time in years, for the first time maybe ever, he believes she will. Outside, the ocean waves crash against the shore. The small house creaks in the wind. Arielle is downstairs reading. Nari is dreaming. And Jang Seung-chul stands in his daughter's doorway, no longer frozen, no longer afraid of doing it wrong. Just present, just trying, just loving the best way he's learned how. Sometimes the question isn't whether we'll make mistakes. It's whether we'll keep showing up after we do, whether we'll choose the floor over the fortress, the quiet presence, over the grand gesture, the messy, imperfect, everyday act of being there, even when we don't know if it'll be enough. What would you have chosen, the fortress or the floor? The end.